Do you always walk into places that don't belong to you, or is tonight special? Sophia had worked 2 back-to-back shifts at the diner, pulled a double lab session at school, and hadn't slept more than 4 hours in 3 days. When she saw the black car sitting outside the bus terminal at midnight, engine running, she did not check the plate number. She did not look at the driver. She just opened the back door and got in. The seat swallowed her whole. Soft, cool leather that smelled faintly of something expensive, too expensive for a rideshare. But her brain was too tired to process the warning. She leaned her head against the door, closed her eyes for just 1 second, and woke up to a low, deeply amused voice. "Do you normally walk into strangers' cars, or did I win some kind of lottery tonight?" Sophia's eyes snapped open. The man sitting beside her, and yes, he was sitting beside her, which meant this was not a rideshare at all, looked like someone had sculpted him out of confidence and good bone structure. Dark eyes, sharp jaw, a suit that probably cost more than her rent for a year, and a smile that was equal parts mocking and curious. There was also, she noticed with growing horror, a small crystal decanter of something amber sitting in a built-in console between the seats. Who puts a minibar in a car? Rich people. Dangerously rich people. The kind of person who could have her arrested for exactly what she just did. I can't believe I'm telling you this story, but it changed my entire life. And I need you to know how it started, because the ending will make sense only if you understand just how badly it began. My name is Mara. I write stories like this because they're real, because they happen to real people, and because sometimes the most impossible-sounding beginnings lead to the most beautiful endings. Before we go further, I want to say thank you to Lucia and Daniel for their kind comments on the last story. You two made my week. And if you want your own comment read in the next video, answer me this. Do you believe someone can change your... You got into the wrong car, and everything that comes after is your own fault. Okay, yes. Let me be honest about this, because I have spent 6 months replaying that night, and I can tell you exactly where I went wrong. I should have checked the license plate. That's it. That's the whole thing. One glance at the number on the app versus the number on the car, and none of this would have happened. But I had been awake for roughly 42 hours. I had taken a microbiology exam that morning, poured coffee for rude customers for 8 hours after that, and then gone back to campus for a lab that ran 2 hours overtime. By the time I walked out of that building and into the cold night air, I was not a person anymore. I was a skeleton held together by stubbornness in a half-eaten granola bar I'd found in my coat pocket. The car was black. It was waiting outside the terminal. My Uber was supposed to be a black car. That was enough logic for my exhausted brain. I climbed in. I sank into the seat. The leather was so soft it felt like sitting on a cloud, which I noticed somewhere in the back of my mind because my shared ride shares usually smelled like pine air freshener and had sticky cup holders. This was different. This was suspiciously, outrageously different. But I was asleep before the thought could finish forming. And then, the voice. Do you normally walk into strangers' cars, or did I win some kind of lottery tonight? I sat up so fast, the world tilted. My heart was hammering, my mouth was dry. And sitting right there beside me, close enough that I could smell his cologne, which was the kind of cologne that comes in a bottle the size of my hand and costs what some people make in a month, was a man who was very clearly, embarrassingly, not my Uber driver. He was watching me with dark eyes that held a kind of controlled amusement, like he'd seen funny things before, but this was making a strong bid for his personal top 10. My voice came out rough, broken from sleep. I thought this was my rideshare. He tilted his head slightly. Your rideshare has a mahogany console and a private bar? I looked around properly for the first time. Crystal decanter, touchscreen panels on the doors, wood trim that glowed warmly in the dim light, seats that probably had more technology in them than my entire apartment. Oh, no. You're not a driver, I said, which was possibly the dumbest thing anyone had said in the history of human language. Definitely not. He leaned back, completely relaxed, completely at ease, like strange women climbing into his car and falling asleep was just a Tuesday thing. I'm Marcus Vega, and this is my car, which you broke into while I was finishing a call. The name landed on me strangely. It meant nothing at the time, but the way he said it, flat, matter-of-fact, the way someone says a name when they expect it to land, told me it should mean something. And the car, and the suit, and the utter certainty in every line of his posture told me he wasn't just rich, he was the kind of rich with layers. I'm so sorry, I said. The words came out in a rush. I worked all day and I've barely slept, and I saw the car and I stopped, took a breath, tried to locate any remaining dignity. I'll get out. I'm so sorry. I reached for the door handle. It's midnight. His voice stopped me, quiet, direct. Where exactly are you going? That's not really your concern. I don't know why I said it like that. Exhaustion makes me defensive. It always has. It's like my brain strips out the filter when it's running on empty and just leaves the sharp edges. He didn't get offended. He laughed, a short, genuine.
I don't need charity. It's not charity. He looked at me steadily. It's common sense. It's late, you're clearly running on nothing, and you're already sitting in the car. He had a point. I hated that he had a point. I looked at the door, looked at him, thought about the 40-minute walk from here to my apartment, in the cold, in the dark, in the part of the city where the streetlights were temperamental at best. Fine, I said, not graciously, more like a surrender. But if you turn out to be dangerous, I'm going to be very irritated. Noted. The smile came back, quick and genuine. He tapped on the privacy glass. Victor, we have a detour. The car moved, smooth and silent, like the expensive things move, like the road had been specially prepared for it. I gave the driver my address through the cracked window and then sat back, trying to project an air of someone who had not just been caught in a billionaire's car. So, Marcus Vega said into the quiet, what's the story? Working double shifts, no sleep? What are you studying for? Biology. I looked at the window. Pre-med track. That's serious. It's necessary. A pause. Necessary for what? I turned to look at him, expecting judgment. The curiosity in his face was genuine. No performance, no condescension, just interest. My neighborhood doesn't have a hospital. It has a clinic that's open 3 days a week and closes when the one doctor goes on vacation. People there get sick, and they wait, and sometimes they wait too long. I'm going to fix that one day. He was quiet for a moment. Something shifted in his expression, something that looked almost like respect. And the 2 jobs fund the plan? The 2 jobs fund the tuition. The plan funds itself on stubbornness. He made a sound that was almost a laugh. The car was slowing. I looked out the window and felt the familiar mix of defensiveness and exhaustion that came from seeing my neighborhood through someone else's eyes. Old buildings, flickering streetlights, a bodega on the corner with a hand-painted sign. It wasn't the worst place in the world. It was home. But it was clearly not the world this man lived in. The car stopped in front of my building. 3 flights of crumbling stairs, a front door that's stuck in winter, and an apartment I shared with my best friend Donnie, who would either be asleep or studying on the couch, depending on whether she'd had coffee after 9 p.m. Thank you for the ride, I said, reaching for the door. Wait. I stopped.
Marcus reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled out a card. Heavy stock, embossed lettering, the kind of card that costs more per unit than most people's lunch. I need a personal assistant, someone to organize my schedule, manage correspondence, coordinate with my house staff when I travel. I have been through 3 assistants in 4 months because none of them can actually manage chaos without falling apart. He held out the card. You, clearly, have a very high tolerance for chaos. I stared at the card. You're offering me a job because I accidentally slept in your car? I'm offering you a job because in 30 seconds of conversation, you told me exactly what you want, why you want it, and how you're going to get it. He tilted his head. That's clearer thinking than most people I interview. I took the card. The paper was heavy in my fingers. I'm not promising anything. I'm not asking for promises. He settled back. Just think about it. I got out of the car, stood on the sidewalk and watched the taillights disappear around the corner. Then I looked down at the card in my hand. Marcus Vega, Executive Chairman, Vega Global Enterprises, a phone number, an address. I climbed the 3 flights. Donnie was on the couch, laptop open, surrounded by papers. She looked up when I came in, took one look at my face, and sat up straighter. What happened? I got in the wrong car, and the man whose car it was offered me a job. She grabbed the card, read it again. Sophia, Marcus Vega, as in Marcus Vega? I don't know who that is. She put the card down, picked it back up, put it down again. He's not a billionaire, Sophia. He's a trillionaire. Like, actually. Forbes listed him. He started 3 companies before he was 30. He owns half the tech development on the Eastern Seaboard. And you slept in his car. I sat down slowly on the edge of the couch. You slept in his car, she said again, like she needed to hear it twice to believe it. I didn't mean to. And he gave you a job card? He said I seemed capable. Donnie stared at me. Then she started laughing, the kind of laugh that comes from somewhere deep in the stomach and can't be stopped. I looked at the card on the table and thought, this is either the beginning of something or the most embarrassing story I will ever have to tell. For 3 days, I ignored the card. I went to class, I poured coffee, I studied until my eyes blurred. Rent was due in...
You haven't called. I don't take charity. It's a job, Sophia. A job that pays better than pouring coffee until your feet go numb. It's not charity. It's a transaction. She looked at me with the particular expression she reserved for moments when I was being stubborn to the point of self-destruction. Is your pride going to cover rent this month? It wasn't, and she knew it. I called the number the next morning, sitting on the edge of my bed, hard doing something embarrassing in my chest. He picked up on the second ring. Vega. It's Sophia Reyes, the girl who hijacked your car. A pause, then that laugh, the same short, genuine one from the back seat. I wasn't sure you'd call. I wasn't sure either, but I need money more than I need pride, apparently. Honest. Good. A brief pause, like he was checking something. Can you start Monday? Yes. I'll send a car, 8:30. He hung up. I sat there looking at my phone, wondering what I had just agreed to. Monday came faster than I was ready for. Victor, the same driver from the night of the car incident, arrived exactly at 8:30 and drove me across the city to a part of town where the buildings had doormen and the trees were deliberately planted. The house, mansion was the more accurate word, sat behind a low iron gate surrounded by grounds that were manicured to the kind of perfection that required dedicated human attention. I felt the gap between where I came from and where I was standing very keenly as I walked to the front door. A woman opened it before I could knock.
60-something, silver hair pinned back with elegant severity, eyes that were warm but missed absolutely nothing. Miss Reyes. Her smile was genuine. "I'm Mrs. Castillo, house manager. Come in, Mr. Vega's expecting you." The inside of the house was worse than the outside in terms of making me feel like I'd wandered into a museum. High ceilings, art on the walls that looked like it belonged in galleries, a staircase that curved upward in a way that probably had an architectural name I didn't know. Mrs. Castillo led me to a set of double doors at the end of a hall, knocked once, and opened them. The office was large and organized in a way that looked efficient until you looked more closely and realized the organization was entirely Marcus Vega's personal system, which appeared to be based on nothing that existed in the known world. 3 monitors, stacks of folders, each labeled in shorthand I could not immediately decode, post-it notes everywhere, a whiteboard covered in what looked like a combination of project timelines and possibly someone's grocery list. Marcus was standing behind the desk, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, frowning at one of the monitors. He looked up when I entered. "You're here," he said, like that was a fact that pleased him, though he wasn't about to say so directly. "I offered you a job. I showed up." Something flickered at the corner of his mouth. "Good. Sit down. Let's talk terms." We spent an hour going over everything: schedule management, correspondence filtering, travel coordination, household oversight when he was abroad. The salary he quoted made me have to consciously control my face. "That's too much," I said. "It's market rate for what I'm asking. It's 3 times what I make now combined." "Then you were severely underpaid." He said it without drama, just a fact. "And before you say anything, this is a job, not a favor, not charity. You will earn every cent. I expect excellence, and I don't apologize for that." Something in my chest unclenched at those words. The thing I'd been afraid of, that this was pity dressed in professional clothing, dissolved. "Understood," I said. He extended his hand across the desk. "Welcome aboard, Miss Reyes." When we shook hands, I felt something I hadn't expected, something quick and electric that ran up my arm and settled somewhere in my sternum. I let go after exactly 1 second more than professional and pretended I hadn't noticed. From his eyes, he was doing the same. This was work, just work. I repeated that to myself as Mrs. Castillo showed me to my own small office down the hall, as Marcus walked me through his calendar, which was a disaster in 3 different time zones, as our eyes met by accident, 3 times, 4 times, while he explained things, and I took careful notes. Just work. Even though some small voice in the back of my mind whispered that getting in the wrong car had just changed the direction of my entire life. That moment when an idea becomes a scene, that's when the story really starts to breathe. And if you're enjoying this one so far, stay with me, because we are just getting started.
This is just a job, so why does it feel like something you have to be careful with? The first few weeks working for Marcus Vega were a masterclass in controlled chaos. His schedule was not just disorganized, it was actively contradictory. He had meetings booked against each other across 3 cities, reminder notes that referenced events with no context, and a filing system that could only be described as archaeological. The older something was, the deeper it was buried. I threw myself into fixing it with the same intensity I brought to everything. Within the first week, I had rebuilt his entire calendar with a color-coded system that even someone running on no sleep, which for Marcus appeared to be the permanent state, could navigate. I created a filter system for his inbox: urgent, important, informational, delete. I coordinated with Mrs. Castillo to make sure the house ran on a schedule that didn't require Marcus to think about it. He noticed. I could see it in the small, controlled way his eyebrow would lift when he reviewed something I'd organized. Not effusive, just a nod, a quiet, "good." But from someone who appeared constitutionally unable to be impressed, it landed like praise. What he was not was warm, or available,
or present in any human sense. Marcus Vega worked 15 hours a day minimum. He arrived to his office before I got there and left after I did. Our interactions were mostly instructions passed in hallways. Reschedule the Dubai call, get me the Q3 projections, tell Rodriguez I'll be 20 minutes late. Short sentences, no eye contact, always already moving to the next thing. A machine. A very handsome, outrageously wealthy machine. I told myself I was grateful for the distance. It was cleaner, simpler. I was here to do a job and earn a salary and fund my future, and the less complicated everything was, the better. But the distance was not quite total. There were cracks in it. Like on Wednesday night, 2 weeks in, when I stayed late to finish organizing a quarterly report. I was in the kitchen making tea when I heard footsteps, and Marcus walked in, loosening his tie, looking like someone had wrung all the energy out of him and hung him up to dry. He stopped when he saw me. "You're still here." "Finishing the Morgan report, you needed it by Thursday." He studied me for a second, then went to the cabinet and pulled down 2 mugs, set one in front of me, made himself tea without asking if I wanted any. We stood on opposite sides of the kitchen island drinking tea in silence for about 4 minutes. And it wasn't awkward, it was oddly comfortable, the kind of silence that exists between people who are, without admitting it, glad to be in the same room. "You should eat more," he said, finally, looking at the granola bar wrapper I'd left on the counter. "That's not a meal. It's a fuel source. It's about 400 calories and 0 protein. How are you studying for medical school on that?" "On the same way I do everything else. Stubbornness." That almost laugh again. "At least you're consistent." He went back to his office. I finished my tea. But I stood at the kitchen island for an extra minute after he left, wondering why that 4 minutes of shared silence had felt like more of a conversation than most actual conversations I'd had that week. There were other moments. The morning I found him asleep at his desk at 6:30, still in yesterday's clothes, laptop open in front of him. I put a coffee on the edge of the desk and left without waking him. When I came in at 9, the coffee was gone, and there was a sticky note on my desk that said simply, "Thank you." No name, no signature, but his handwriting. The afternoon a courier delivered the wrong package. In the sender, some overseas contact, called in a panic. Marcus was in back-to-back meetings. I handled the call myself, rerouted the package, sorted the insurance claim, and left a summary on his desk. He read it, looked up at me through the glass office wall, and gave me a single nod. It felt, inexplicably, like a standing ovation. Danny noticed the change in me when I came home. "You're different," she said 3 weeks in. "I'm less exhausted." "That's part of it," she studied me, "but it's something else. She made a vague gesture. "Lighter, like something has your attention. I have a new job that I'm actually good at." She did not look convinced. "And the man whose job it is my employer." "Sure." She sipped her tea with the expression of someone reserving judgment. Danny had done her research on Marcus Vega. She'd shown me articles, business profiles, a few society pages. He was 34, built his first company at 25, sold it at 28 for a sum of money that made the article writer visibly struggle to keep their prose professional. Started 2 more, expanded internationally, was described in 3 separate articles as brilliant, relentless, and notoriously private. Nothing about his personal life beyond the vague reference to a relationship years ago that he ended badly, and that he apparently did not discuss. I put all of that information in a folder in my mind labeled, "Not Your Business," and closed it firmly. He was my boss. That was the entire story. Except that the story kept adding chapters I didn't write. Like the afternoon in week 3, when I was in my office going through his travel calendar, and he stopped in the doorway. Not with instructions, just stopped, leaned against the doorframe with his arms crossed, and watched me work for a second. "You muttered at the screen," he said when I looked up. "It argues back. Some of these flight arrangements don't make physical sense." "No, they don't. The previous assistant booked them. I've been meaning to have them fixed. I'm fixing them now." I can see that. He stayed in the doorway. What system are you using to prioritize? I explained it. He listened with his full attention, the kind of attention that was the opposite of performative, that didn't track around the room looking for something more interesting. Just direct, genuine focus. The kind I had to get used to because I was not accustomed to being looked at like that when I was talking. That's better than what I had, he said. It's just logic. Most people don't find scheduling logic intuitive. You do. He pushed off the doorframe, turned to go. Good work. And he left. I looked at the doorway he'd been standing in, and then looked back at my screen. 2 words. Good work. And yet, I turned up the internal file labeled "Not Your Business" and reminded myself firmly of its contents. But then there was the evening in week 4 when Danny came by the mansion to drop off a textbook I'd forgotten, and Marcus happened to be in the entrance hall when she arrived. The introduction was polite, quick, professional. Marcus shook her hand, said something appropriate, and said he had calls to make. Before he disappeared, he looked at me, quick, just a second, with an expression that might have been asking if she was staying, or might have been asking something else entirely. Then he was gone up the stairs. Danny waited until we were in my office with the door closed. She said nothing for a long moment, just looked at the door Marcus had gone through. Danny, I'm not saying anything. Good. I'm just paused. Processing. There's nothing to process. He looked at you, she said, when he was leaving. Just before he turned, he looked at you the way people look at something they're trying not to look at. That's very specific for a 1-second observation. I'm very specific. She sat down on the edge of the office chair. Sophia, I love you. I know you, and I know that face you made when he left. What face? The face of someone who's doing a very, very good job of not reacting to something. I opened my mouth. I'm not telling you to do anything, she said quickly. I know this is complicated. I know you need this job. I know you are the most carefully self-protective person I've ever met, and mostly it's kept you standing when other people would have fallen. I looked at her levelly. I'm just saying, I see it, and I think you see it too, and being realistic about what's in front of you is different from acting on it. I said nothing for a moment, looked at the stack of papers on the desk. He's my boss, Danny. He is, she agreed. Absolutely. I'm just filing a report. She left. I sat in the office for 20 more minutes, staring at the calendar on my screen without seeing it. Before she got to the car, Marcus came back down the stairs with a folder he'd clearly just remembered. He handed it to me, end-of-month projections he needed formatted. Our hands were close for a second, the way hands are when something is passed between people. Neither of us made anything of it. Drive safe going home, he said, turning back toward the stairs. I always do. He stopped, 1 foot on the bottom stair, looked back. I know. Something in his voice was slightly different, warmer and more careful at the same time. Good night, Sophia. Good night. That night, lying in my apartment, listening to the city outside, I held the file labeled "Not Your Business" and was aware, with increasing honesty, that its contents were becoming harder to believe. He was my boss. That was the entire story. I almost believed it. Almost. What happens when the walls we build start to come down on their own? 2 months in, the professional distance between Marcus and me was technically still intact. Technically, the reality was something more like a wall with hairline fractures running through it. Still standing, still functional, but you could see the light coming through if you looked at the right angle. Small things accumulated. The way his eyes would find mine across a room full of people just for a second, like a reflex he hadn't decided to have. The way he'd hand me coffee in the morning, black for him, oat milk and 1 sugar for me, because he had apparently memorized this at some point without either of us acknowledging it. The way he'd stop in the doorway of my office sometimes, not with instructions, just present, like he was checking something. I got good at not reacting to these things. I had years of practice at keeping my face neutral. Growing up the way I did, showing too much of what you felt was a liability. But the Boston trip changed things. He announced it on a Thursday, 2 days' notice, important investors, critical presentation. He needed me there to manage logistics and take notes during the meetings. I said yes before he finished the sentence. The flight the next morning was my first time on a private plane. I tried not to let that show on my face, but the moment I walked up the stairs and into the cabin, cream leather, polished wood, a workspace with actual monitors, I stopped pretending. First time? Marcus was already seated, watching me with that expression. My usual travel experience involves the middle seat in someone's elbow, I said. So yes. He laughed. Actually laughed, and for a moment the controlled, relentless executive was just a person, and the person was amused, and I had to look away before my face did something I'd regret. We worked for most of the flight, going over presentations, running through likely questions from the investors, refining talking points, but there were pauses, and in the pauses we talked. Music, bad food we'd both eaten at some point out of necessity, the worst professional experience we'd each survived. The conversation drifted naturally, the way it does between people who are more comfortable with each other than they've admitted. The hotel was in a different universe from anywhere I'd stayed before. The lobby alone was bigger than my entire floor at home. The manager greeted Marcus by name, walked us to the top floor personally. Your suites, Mr. Vega, as requested, continuing rooms with connecting balconies. My suite, with a balcony, a separate living room, a bathroom with a tub I could have held a meeting in. I put my things away quickly and went to Marcus's room to review the plan for the evening's business dinner. He was finishing a call when I arrived, 3 languages in 10 minutes, switching seamlessly, and gestured for me to sit while he wrapped up. I added "speaks 3 languages fluently" to the mental file I was not keeping. The dinner was at a restaurant where the prices weren't on the menu. I was there to observe, take notes, be useful. The investors were older, careful men who asked precise questions. Marcus answered every one with the kind of ease that came from not just knowing the information, but having lived it. I was watching him answer a question about projected margins when one of the investors, a man named Hargrove with a silver tie and eyes like a counting machine, turned his gaze to me. "And your associate," he said, to Marcus, about me, like I wasn't sitting right there. "Decorative choice, or does she serve a function?" The table went quiet. I felt the words land, felt the familiar flush of anger that I'd spent years learning to contain. Marcus didn't raise his voice, didn't change his expression by much, but when he spoke, the tone was a few degrees colder than before. "Miss Reyes is my executive assistant. She has reorganized a system that 3 previous professionals couldn't manage, handles logistics I used to lose days to, and has a working memory for detail that I found most analysts don't match." He looked at Hargrove steadily. "She's here because she's essential. Shall we talk about the Q4 projections?" Hargrove backed off. The dinner continued. In the elevator going back up, alone for the first time in hours, I let the breath out I'd been holding. "You didn't need to do that," I said. "I can handle comments like that." "I know you can," he looked at the elevator doors. "I didn't do it because you couldn't. I did it because he was wrong." The elevator was quiet for a moment. "Why does it matter to you?" I asked. The question came out softer than I intended. He turned and looked at me, and something in his expression shifted, something open that I usually didn't see on his face. The elevator stopped. The doors opened. "Good night, Sophia." His voice was careful again, controlled. "Sleep well. Tomorrow will be long." He stepped out first. I went to my room and closed the door and stood with my back against it, listening to my own heartbeat. I couldn't sleep. At 11:30 I gave up and went to the balcony. The city stretched below me, lit and moving. The October air was cool, sharp enough to be useful. A knock at my door. I checked the pier hole. "Marcus." He was standing in the hallway with his jacket off, hands in his pockets, hair slightly less perfect than it had been all day, like he'd run his hand through it a few times. He looked for the first time in 2 months like he didn't know exactly what to do next. I opened the door. "I can't sleep," he said. Not defensive, just honest. "Do you want to sit outside?" I indicated the balcony. "The air helps." We sat in the chairs the hotel had placed out there, the city visible below us, and for a while we just existed without performance. Then Marcus said quietly, "My parents are alive, but they might as well be names in an address book. Calls on birthdays, expensive gifts that prove they have money but not attention. I grew up with everything material and not much else." I looked at him. He was watching the lights. "So you work," I said. "I work. To fill it? To control it." He looked at me then. "And you're running yourself into the ground. What are you filling?" The words were out before I decided to say them. My parents died when I was 15. Car accident, late winter, bad road. I went into the foster system for 3 years. Different houses, different rules. I learned very fast that the only person you can actually depend on is yourself. "Sophia," his voice got very quiet. "I worked so much because I'm afraid to stop, afraid that if I slow down, everything I've built will turn out to be temporary, afraid of needing someone and having them disappear." "You are not what you came from," he said. "You don't know what I came from." "I know what I can see." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I see someone who rebuilt herself from the ground up without help from anyone and is still standing. That's not weakness dressed up as strength. That's actual strength."
I looked at him. The distance between our chairs was small. The city hummed below us. The air moved. "You're the first person I've worked for who talks to me like a person, not an utility, a person." "That's because you are one. Alarmingly so." Something moved in his expression, something warm and carefully held back. He leaned toward me, or I moved. I genuinely couldn't tell, but the space between us shrank, and I became very aware of his breathing and the way his eyes dropped to my mouth for just a second before he caught himself. I stood up, fast. "I can't." The words came out before I could stop them. "Marcus, I can't. I need this job. I need the stability. If it goes somewhere and then it doesn't, I can't start over again. I can't." He was very still. He looked at me for a long moment, jaw tight, expression controlled. "I understand," he said. He stood. "I respect that." He went back to his room. I stayed on the balcony alone, looking at the city, with the very clear and specific sensation of someone who made the right decision and hated every single thing about it. The flight home was professionally torturous. We worked. We were correct and efficient with each other. We did not talk about the balcony. Mrs. Castillo noticed the moment we walked in the door. She had radar for this kind of thing. She just made fresh coffee and said, far too innocently, "How was Boston?" and nodded when I said productive in a tone that clearly meant nothing of the kind. In the weeks that followed, the tension did what tension always does when you try to suppress it. It intensified. Accidental touches when we reached for the same document, conversations that started about logistics and ended in the kind of quiet that said more than the words before it, looks that went on a beat too long. I cataloged all of them in that mental file I was definitely not keeping. Then came the gala. "I need someone to accompany me to a corporate charity event Friday," Marcus said one morning, not quite meeting my eyes. "As a professional presence. There will be contacts there I need to manage, and I do better with someone in my corner who actually understands the work." "Do you want me to arrange a date?" I said.
keeping my voice completely professional. "No," he looked up. "I want you." In a professional capacity, that was what he meant, and I knew it, and still the words did something catastrophic to my pulse. "Of course," I said. "I'll look at the dress code." A box arrived on Thursday. Midnight blue fabric, cut simply but perfectly. The kind of dress that had been chosen by someone who had paid enough attention to know my exact measurements in my exact taste. "Work uniform," Marcus said, when I found him to object about the cost. "You can't attend in jeans." I wore it Friday. When I came down the stairs, he was in the entrance hall in a dark suit, and he looked up, and something in his whole body went very still for a second. "You look—" He stopped himself, restarted, ready to make an excellent impression. "That's what I'm here for," I said, keeping my voice steady with effort. The event was held in a ballroom full of people wearing more than I'd made in the last 3 years. Marcus moved through it with ease, and I stayed close, noting names and faces, connecting dots. He introduced me to everyone as his executive assistant, and I shook hands and smiled and was efficiently invisible. And then a woman appeared. Tall, polished, wearing a dress that required significant confidence. She moved towards Marcus with the ease of someone who was used to arriving and being welcomed. "Marcus." Her voice was warm in a proprietary way. "Elena." Polite, measured. His hand, I noticed, stayed at his side. "It's been too long." She angled towards him, away from me like I was a vague background element. "We should catch up properly. You promised me dinner in the fall, and fall is nearly over." "I don't remember the promise," he said, and I believed him. She laughed, touched his arm, said something I didn't catch. I watched his face, which was performing courtesy without feeling it, and felt, regardless, a hot and deeply inconvenient sensation somewhere in my chest that had no business being there. Elena eventually noticed me the way someone notices furniture that's been placed unexpectedly. "And you are?" "Sofia Reyes, Mr. Vega's assistant." She looked me over, quick, thorough, the kind of assessment that is trying to determine whether something is worth worrying about. Her conclusion was apparently no, because she turned back to Marcus like I'd become ambient. I smiled pleasantly and said nothing. But I watched, and what I watched was Marcus, the way his posture held a certain careful distance from her, the way his eyes never quite warmed the way they did in unguarded moments, the way he kept exactly enough physical space between them to communicate something without being rude about it. He didn't want to be there, with her specifically. I could see it. What I could also see, unfortunately, was Elena touching his arm again, a second time, then a third, laughter just a little too bright, leaning in to say something low and close. And even knowing all the things I knew about his posture, in his distance, in his eyes, even knowing it was nothing, the feeling in my chest was not nothing. I had not wanted anything for myself for a long time, not like this. Not the hot, specific, inconvenient kind of wanting that landed like jealousy even when I had absolutely no right to it. I was his assistant. He owed me professional courtesy and a salary. That was the arrangement. And still, watching Elena with her hand on his arm, feeling it like a splinter.
I excused myself to refill my water glass and stood at the bar for exactly 90 seconds, reminding myself of every reason this was not an appropriate thing to feel, all of which were correct and none of which helped. When I came back, Marcus had created some distance between himself and Elena and was talking to a pair of executives I recognized from his calendar. He caught my eye over their shoulders. Something in his expression, a relief, quiet and controlled, that I stored in the file I was definitely not keeping. Elena found me alone 10 minutes later near the dessert table. "So," she said, pleasantly, too pleasantly, "how long have you worked for Marcus?" "About 3 months. He goes through assistants quickly." She said it with a smile that wasn't unkind exactly, but wasn't warm either. "I hope you're settling in." "Very well, thank you." She picked up a small pastry, considered it, put it back. "He's a complicated person, very focused. It can be a lot if you're not used to it." "I'm used to complicated," I said. She glanced at me again, recalibrating something. "Yes," she said slowly, "I imagine you are." She drifted away. I went back to Marcus. "Everything all right?" he asked, without looking directly at me. "Fine," I said. "You?" "Better now," he said, and this time he did look at me, brief, direct, honest. Then he turned back to the executives, and I kept my face neutral, and we spent the rest of the night being precisely professional. In the car going home, the city sliding past the windows, he said, very quietly, "Elena is someone I knew years ago. It ended because she wanted what I could give more than she wanted me. I haven't seen her since." "You don't need to explain that." "I know." A pause. "I wanted to." I looked at the window. My reflection looked composed. "Marcus, he knows," he said again. "The answer you gave in Boston stands. I'm not asking you to change it." "Then why?" "Because I want you to know that what you saw in there was nothing." His voice was quiet and very certain. The car stopped outside the mansion. I got out, went upstairs, sat on the edge of my bed in the midnight blue dress, and held my own hands for a minute, thinking about what it meant when someone found it important that you knew something. It meant something. That was the problem. That was the entire problem. The week after the gala was the most professionally correct week we had ever had. Every interaction was crisp and brief and exactly what it was supposed to be. He did not come to the kitchen for late tea. I did not stay past my hours. We were perfect, and it felt like standing in a cold hallway with the door to a warm room very clearly visible. Mrs. Castilla watched this with the expression of a woman who had all the patience in the world and was choosing not to use it. "You two are idiots," she said, to no one in particular, refilling her own coffee. I opened my mouth. "Not a criticism," she said, in a tone that absolutely was a criticism, merely an observation. She walked out of the kitchen. I stood there for a moment, looking at the very correct, very professional, very empty space around me, and thought, she is not wrong. Something needed to change. I just didn't know yet that it was going to change the way it did, with a burst pipe and 2 bags of salvaged belongings and a text message that rearranged everything.
Most of what matters. "Come in." He said it like there was no other option, because as far as he was concerned, there wasn't. "Mrs. Castillo has the guest room ready. It's yours for as long as you need." "Marcus, I should probably find—" "This makes sense. You work here. You're here most of the time already. It's practical." He held my gaze for a moment. "And you shouldn't be alone right now." That last part, the way he said it. "Temporarily," I said. "Temporarily," he agreed. But he said it in the tone of someone filing it under, "We'll see." I tried to keep appropriate distance in those first few days. Room for sleeping, common areas minimally occupied, evenings spent at the small desk in the guest room with my study materials. But the mansion had its own logic. Tuesday morning I came down early for coffee and found Marcus in the kitchen in a worn t-shirt and bare feet, making eggs. He looked over when I came in, pushed a second mug toward the machine. We ate breakfast at the island as the sun came through the big windows. We talked about nothing serious, a strange news article, his plans for the day, what I had in class that evening. Comfortable, easy, like we'd done it 100 times. Thursday night, I came home late from a lab, and Marcus was on the living room couch with a documentary about international architecture playing on the screen. He looked up. "This one is genuinely interesting, if you want." I should have gone upstairs. I sat down on the other end of the couch. By 20 minutes in, the space between us had quietly reduced to the size of a breath, his shoulder against mine, sharing the same small bowl of almonds. When the documentary ended, neither of us moved. "I should sleep," I said. "You should," he agreed. Neither of us moved. 10 more minutes passed before I finally stood, said goodnight, and walked upstairs with the very clear awareness that I was in trouble of the very specific kind I had promised myself I would not be in. 2 weeks after I moved in, on a Friday, we watched another movie, some comedy neither of us was really tracking. I was tired from the week. The couch was the most comfortable thing in my life. Marcus was warm and solid beside me. Without quite deciding to, I rested my head on his shoulder. He went very still. Then his arm came around my shoulders, pulling me in slightly, not making a thing of it, just including me. "I'll just close my eyes for a minute," I said. "Of course," he said, and his voice was warm in a way I'd only heard in small, unguarded moments. I fell asleep. I don't know how long I was out. Long enough for the movie to end, for the room to go quiet, for the night to settle fully around the house. I surfaced briefly when I felt him move, his arms coming under me, lifting, carrying. I was aware enough to register warmth, safety, the particular feeling of being held by someone who is being careful. "Marcus," I said, somewhere in the fog. "Shh, you're fine. Just sleep." I was put down on something soft, a blanket drawn up, the sound of footsteps moving away, and a pause, long enough that I noticed it even half asleep, at the door. He said something, so quiet it could have been anything. I didn't catch it. I was gone again before I could try. In the morning, I woke up to sunlight through the curtains, and a feeling in my chest I couldn't immediately name. Not anxiety, which was my usual morning companion, something else. Something quieter and more decided. When I came downstairs, he was in the kitchen, already dressed, coffee made. He looked up when I appeared in the doorway, and something in his expression, carefully controlled but not quite successfully, told me he'd been waiting, and not just for the coffee. "We need to talk," I said. He set his mug down, all the way down, like he didn't want to be holding anything. I know. I came into the kitchen, stayed on my side of the island for a moment, organizing my words, because I had spent so long being careful with them. I can't keep pretending that what's between us is professional, that I don't notice things I notice, that I don't feel things I feel. I stopped, started again. My whole life I've been careful, kept people at a distance, protected myself from needing anyone, because every time I needed someone, they were gone, and I had to rebuild. I think I've been protecting myself from something that's actually not going to hurt me, and I'm tired of it. I'm tired of being so careful that I'm missing the thing that's right in front of me. He moved around the island, stood in front of me, not touching, not yet, leaving the space between us like a question I could still answer either way. "I have been trying so hard to be careful," he said. His voice was low and even, but I knew him well enough now to hear what was underneath. "Because I am aware, very aware, of the difference between our situations. You needed this job. You needed the stability. I didn't want to be something that cost you either of those things." A pause. I told myself every day that I was keeping my distance because it was the right thing. Was it? No. The word came out simply. Or, yes, it was the responsible thing, but I was also just afraid that you'd say no, that I'd push and lose what we had already, which was, for the record, something I valued more than I expected to. "You scared me," I said, "the way you looked at me from that first night, like there was something worth looking at, like I was visible in the real way, not the useful way." Something crossed his expression, moved through it, and settled. "You are extraordinarily visible," he said, quietly, "whether you mean to be or not." The morning light was coming through the big windows. The coffee was still cold on the counter. We were standing 2 feet apart with everything finally said, and the space between us felt like something you could step across. He raised his hand, slow, deliberate, a question in every inch of the movement, and touched my face. His thumb traced my cheekbone, careful, like he'd been imagining this exact gesture for long enough that he wanted to do it correctly. "Is this okay?" he asked. "Yes, all the way down. Yes." He kissed me slowly, not like someone taking something, like someone finally arriving somewhere they had been working their way toward for a long time, careful and warm and absolutely certain. When we pulled apart, I was still standing in the kitchen of his house. The morning was still the morning, the coffee was still there. Everything was the same and completely different. "What happens now?" I asked. My voice came out slightly unsteady, which I decided not to be embarrassed by. "We figure it out, together, properly. I need to keep my independence." The words came quickly because they were important and because I learned to say important things immediately before I thought better of it. "This cannot be a situation where I am here by necessity or obligation or because the circumstances landed me here. Every day I choose to be here has to be a genuine choice, not a comfortable habit, a decision." "I know." His hands framed my face, steady and careful. "That's not something I would ask you to give up. That quality in you, that specific refusal to be defined by circumstance, is half of why I feel the way I feel." "What's the other half?" "That smile, the real one, the one that very few people got. You fell asleep in my car, snored for 20 minutes, and when you woke up, your first instinct was to be sarcastic at me. It was the most interesting thing that had happened in approximately 2 years. I laughed, which broke something loose in my chest, something that had been held there for a long time. "So what about work?" I said. "Mrs. Castillo has been looking to step back from active management for over a year. Property director, your own team, your own budget, your own decisions. You'd be running the household operations as a completely separate role from anything to do with me." He held my gaze. "Or I can place you at another firm, completely clean separation, if you want the distance." I thought about it honestly. Other offices, other cities, clear lines, no complications, and less of this. Less of mornings in this kitchen, and documentaries on that couch, in the specific way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't watching. "I want to stay," I said, "but as someone with her own authority and her own reason for being here. Not your assistant, not someone who's here because you're covering my rent. Someone who chose this." I looked at him. "Can it be that?" "It has always been that, even before you knew it, even before I admitted it to you." He pulled me in again, slower this time, like we had time now, like the urgency was finished, and what was left was just the choosing. When we pulled apart, I was smiling without having decided to. "This is all because I couldn't read a license plate," I said. "This," he said, his hands still in my hair, "is the best accidental break-in in recorded history."
The beginning was an accident. What comes after is on purpose. The months that followed were full of change, the kind that happens when you stop running from something and start walking toward it instead. Mrs. Castillo trained me personally for the property director role with the methodical patience of someone who had spent decades making sure the right things were in the right hands. "I knew from the week you arrived," she told me one afternoon over tea, with the satisfied certainty of someone who had been right about something for months. "You too were too obvious. I just waited." I moved my things properly into a room. Not the guest room, eventually,
But that's a chapter for a different day, one that unfolded slowly, on both our terms, with the kind of unhurried certainty that comes when something is actually right. Danny helped with the move, evaluating every room with the thoroughness of someone who loved me and wanted documentary evidence that this was real. "You deserve this," she said, squeezing my hand before she left. "Not the house, not the money. Him. You deserve someone who actually sees you," I said, and it was the truest thing I'd said in years. Marcus saw me. Not who he wanted me to be, or who would be most convenient. He saw the actual version, stubborn, careful with trust, fiercely independent, still carrying 15-year-old weight in some part of my chest. He saw all of it, and shows it specifically. We were not a perfect couple, because those don't exist. We disagreed, on small things mostly, and occasionally on larger ones. He had a habit of solving problems without checking first if you wanted them solved, which was useful in a business context and occasionally maddening in a personal one. I had a habit of deciding I was fine before I had actually checked, which he saw through every single time. But we talked, always, even when it was uncomfortable, even when one of us had to say I was wrong first, which was more or less equally distributed over time. I kept studying, insisted on paying my own tuition from my salary. Marcus tried to argue this once, then read my expression and quietly did not argue it again. That respect for the thing I needed to do for myself was part of what made it real. 6 months after the morning in the kitchen, Danny came for a Sunday visit. She found us in the kitchen. Marcus was attempting a complex recipe he'd seen online. It was not going well. I was at the island laughing at him, which I was aware was not helpful and continued to do anyway. Danny leaned into the doorway and watched us for a moment. "Who would have guessed?" she said, to no one in particular. "It's not that surprising," I said. "You broke into a stranger's car and ended up here." She spread her hands, indicating the kitchen, the house, him, the whole situation. "It's a little surprising." "It was one mistake, a very specific, very understandable mistake." "You were asleep before the door closed," she said. "I was exhausted." "You were asleep, Sophia." Marcus laughed, looking up from his culinary disaster. "She has a point." "Nobody asked you," I told him, but I was smiling. Later that night, after Danny left and the kitchen was fully recovered from what Marcus had done to it, we went for a walk. Just us, the quiet night, the neighborhood around the house, which I now knew block by block. At some point, we got back to the car, his car, the same one, and I climbed into the back seat. Just two. He got in right after, raised an eyebrow. "Breaking in again?" "I live here," I said. "Technically, you live in the house. The car is on the property." He looked at me with that expression, the one that was entirely for me, that I had memorized completely, that I would have bet money nobody else ever got the full version of. "You are impossible," he said. "You knew that when you drove me home." "Yes, I did." He leaned over and kissed me, slow and certain, nothing to prove, nowhere to be. We stayed in the back seat for a while, just talking about small things and comfortable things, the city quiet around us. Eventually, we went back inside, to the house that was ours, to the life we had built from what had started as a wrong turn. I thought about that night sometimes, the library door opening, the cold air, the black car waiting, the exhaustion that stopped me from reading a single number on a license plate, a chain of small failures that led me one step at a time to exactly where I was supposed to be. Mistakes don't always cost you. Sometimes they give you something you didn't know you were missing. Sometimes sleeping in the wrong car leads you to the right life, with the right person, building something real. And yes, I still fall asleep anywhere that's comfortable enough. He still finds it worth mentioning, and honestly, I don't mind a little.